Today, we're diving into a landmark legal case that answers a really tough, really personal question about marriage, duty, and, well, money. So, think about this for a second. If a wife decides she's done and walks out of the marriage, does her husband's duty to support her financially just stop? It seems like a simple question, right? But the legal answer is anything but. And this exact issue was at the very center of a fascinating court battle. All right, so let's set the scene. Meet Bheekha Ram and Goma Devi. They were a married couple in Rajasthan, India for over 10 years, and they had 2 sons together. But on the inside, their relationship was completely breaking down. Now, when this dispute went to court, 2 totally different realities came out. On one hand, you had Goma Devi. She described a nightmare of a marriage, claiming she was tortured for dowry, beaten, and that her husband had even tried to kill her. But on the other hand, Bheekha Ram painted a completely different picture. He said no, she was the one causing mental anguish, that he went so far as to build a separate house for them, and that she just up and left for no good reason at all. But then, the whole case took a massive turn when Goma Devi was testifying. Under oath, she admitted some pretty stunning things. She said that, yeah, for 14 years, her husband had given her his entire salary. She also admitted he'd always supported the family, was perfectly willing to have her and the kids live with him, and she was still living in the house he'd built. You can see how these statements started to clash with her story of neglect and being thrown out. So, with 2 conflicting stories and some really confusing testimony, what were the courts supposed to do? Well, this was no open and shut case. It actually went on a wild legal roller coaster, bouncing between 3 different courts, and believe it or not, each one came up with a totally different answer. Okay, so check this out. First, the magistrate's court took a look and sided with the husband. Claim denied. They decided she left without a good enough reason. But then she appealed. The Sessions Court heard the case and did a complete 180. They reversed the decision and ordered the husband to pay up. So now you've got 2 courts with 2 opposite verdicts. The whole thing then lands in the lap of the High Court, the final decider. What do you think they did? And that brings us to the final showdown. After years of back and forth, the Rajasthan High Court issued its ruling in 1999, and this is the decision that would set a major precedent for years to come. So first things first, what about the wife, Goma Devi? The lower court had ordered her husband to pay 250 rupees a month. The High Court looked at the case and said, nope, that order was set aside, canceled. She would get 0 maintenance from her husband. But, and this is a really big but, that wasn't the whole story. The court then turned to the issue of their 2 sons, and here they agreed with the previous order. The husband, Bheekha Ram, still had to pay 125 rupees a month for each child. That was upheld. So you see, the court drew a very sharp line in the sand between the wife's rights and the children's rights. So why the split decision? I mean, why say no to the wife, but yes to the children? To get that, we have to dig into the core legal idea the High Court was working with. It's a concept that basically links money to marital responsibility. Here it is. This is the heart of the whole ruling. The court basically said, look, a wife's right to get financial support from her husband comes from her fulfilling her end of the marital bargain. In their eyes, if you leave the marriage without a legally good reason, you kind of forfeit your claim to that support. The whole case really came down to these 4 little words: without any sufficient reason. So what does that actually mean? Well, the court looked at Goma Devi's claims of cruelty and decided she hadn't really proven them, especially with her own testimony contradicting parts of her story. So they concluded she left voluntarily, not because she was forced out. And in the eyes of the law, that didn't count as a sufficient reason to leave and still demand maintenance. The High Court also made another really important kind of technical point. They said the Sessions judge, the one who reversed the first decision, kind of overstepped his authority. See, the job of a higher court in a situation like this isn't to redo the whole trial and reweigh the evidence. Its job is just to check if the first court made any big legal mistakes. It's a subtle but crucial part of how the justice system is supposed to work. Okay, so you might be thinking, this case is from 1999. Why are we still talking about it? Well, because the ideas laid down here have had a huge, long-lasting ripple effect, influencing how family law cases are handled in India even today. Let's just break down the takeaways here. For wives, the message was clear. Just making allegations isn't enough. You need to bring credible proof. For husbands, it gave them a solid legal defense. If you can prove your wife left without a just cause, you may not have to pay maintenance. But for children, and this is so important, it ring-fenced their right to support. It made it clear that no matter what the parents' issues are, the kids must be provided for. And finally, it put up a clear guardrail for how appeals courts should operate. And get this isn't just some dusty old precedent. The ideas from the Bheekha Ram case are so fundamental that they've been carried right over into India's new criminal code, the BNSS. So even though the law books have been updated, this principle connecting maintenance to marital duty is still very much alive and kicking. At the end of the day, this case highlights a real tightrope walk in family law. How do you protect people who are genuinely in trouble without creating a system that can be misused? It leaves us with a big question. Does a principle from 1999, which is based on the idea of marital duty, still fit the realities of relationships in families today? The Bheekha Ram case may have settled the law, but the conversation about what's truly fair, well, that's a conversation that never really ends.